Welcome to this video about the care act duties in relation to independent advocacy. Please note that we have other videos about this topic in our website, but we also have many other videos and resources in other areas of the Care Act. Under each of the themes of the videos, we have some reflective questions that will help listeners to ensure they embed the learning in their daily practice. My name is Carmen, and today with me is June. In this video, we are going to explore what is an appropriate person under the law for an independent advocacy. The law tells us, social care practitioners, that we have to consider the need for an independent advocate if the person has substantial difficulty in being involved in the process. The process being that interaction that we are having with the individual, which could be an assessment, could be a support plan, safeguarding procedure. And the law tells us that we have to consider if there is an appropriate person that can do this role. Now, appropriate person is not whatever the social care practitioner or the individual want to define. And the opinion that matters is not only that of the individual, adult or carer, or the social care practitioner. The law defines what an appropriate person is and which criteria it has to meet to be appropriate to act instead of an independent advocate. And the key thing is that the role of the appropriate person is not to speak on behalf of the individual only, but to have the necessary skills to be able to maximize the individual's involvement in the process. June and myself are going to explore what are the pros and cons of using different people as appropriate persons, and how somebody who may be appropriate for one thing is not an appropriate person under the law to act instead of an independent advocate. So, for example, June, in your experience, a member of your family or a friend, what will be the pros and cons of them acting as an appropriate person on your behalf?
Well, I think that my family and friends would very much want to support me in whatever way they can. But I don't think that they would have the skills and the knowledge about, one, what their role would be, and two, how can they best support me in that role. And I think that it's really important that I keep my family and friends in a special, safe, sacred place. I don't want them to be put through what I'm going through, basically, which is very likely to happen if they're pulled into it. So they can support me in different way than actually entering into the room or the discussion, because they would feel very, very vulnerable themselves. So,
and that's an exceptional point, because, and you know, in some circumstances, social care practitioners think unless there is a conflict of interest, a member of the family is an appropriate person, a next of kin. But there are many other reasons why a member of the family is not an appropriate person under the law. And one of them is those you want them to support you from a different angle. You want them to have a different role. Yeah, if you bring them as an appropriate person in this context, the independent advocacy, they become somebody involved in the care and support system. They become somebody who needs to know about the social care system. They see you through different lens. They need to see how they support you getting involved, rather than them having their own views, isn't it? So it takes away something from them, and it can take away something from you too, because then they're not your emotional support, special support anymore, isn't it? So it is important to distinguish that. Yeah, very, very good point.
They really would find it hard to be independent in that way, of keeping a distance in a way, but being close enough to me. And I'd rather that they did stay close to me, and not have to undertake this role and just compromise their independence as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but also it takes quite a lot of skill sometimes to support somebody who is not in the best place. Somebody with dementia or who is in a mental health crisis or with learning disabilities. It takes some skills to support them to participate and being engaged. I mean, not every member of the family is able to do that, is it?
No, and don't want to. I mean, I remember that when they've said, well, to my son, who's my nearest relative, and in those days the law said the nearest relative must be next of kin. He happened to be just 18, and he was the nearest relative. Now that I see that you recognise that's a very difficult place for both the
Yeah,
mother and the son.
yeah,
And and they said, will you take him to hospital in your car? Will you drive him? He said, no, I'm going off now to meet my friends. And I valued that he actually didn't want to get involved.
yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is. We need to take all those things into account. It's not only about there is somebody who knows the person enough. Yeah, it's about do they want to? Do they have the necessary skills? Is it gonna affect the dynamic and the relationship between them if we give them this different role? So all that has to be considered. Sometimes also there is a translator or an interpreter because the person speaks second language. There is some hearing impairment and sometimes it is considered that this translator or interpreter can act as an independent person they are supporting the individual. What will be your views on that?
Well, I think that an interpreter or translator can say the person's words, but will they say the person's words? I do wonder if within their role of translating, they might either bring things in or leave things out. And I think that, they do have a job, but it's completely different to advocating in any way. And I know that if people have translators or interpreters, if social services have got one to come along, sometimes there can be community knowledge that actually that advocate shouldn't, or that interpreter shouldn't hold. So they hear things about a person in the community, the individual, and the individual doesn't want them to because they worry it'll get out in the community. So in fact, that it has to be the confidentiality of that process has to be recognized. And that's why I would say interpreters and translators, if they can be as independent as possible, it stops that knowledge sort of getting out.
Yeah. Yeah, you just brought something because I mean the actual fact is a translator or interpreter is there to translate or interpret what you're saying, not to support you getting involved. So again, it's a completely different role. And you're right, you brought up something that is absolutely crucial to that is confidentiality. Because if we have, for example, I mean, you have a family, but some people don't have a family, and it may be a neighbor or a friend who is brought in by social care practitioners to act as an appropriate person. Well, where is the confidentiality element? How is the person gonna ensure that whatever is disclosed in that conversation is not gonna be outside in the community? Are we social care practitioners making that crystal clear and ensuring? So the selection of this appropriate person or the identification and agreement is beyond, is there anybody there who knows the individual? We need to take into account all these things that June has been mentioning instead of what is the role in the dynamic. Do the individual and the family or neighbor or friend want to take that role? How will the dynamic be affected if we bring this person? Does the person has the skills to support the individual being more involved? And then how do we deal with confidentiality? So let's think about all those things, please, social care practitioners. Please think about all those things when you select or identify an appropriate person. And remember, if they don't meet the legal criteria, an independent advocate is necessary. Please watch the rest of the videos. In the next conversation, June and myself will be talking about the outcomes of independent advocacy, also in relation to other types of advocacy. Thank you very much.